Patrick Cook here. Well, thanks for joining me in this next session of the Mandelbulb 3D Tutorial Series along the lines of developing an animation. Well, I'll tell you what, we've come an awful long way. I mean, this is session 81. It's kind of hard to believe, actually, but for me, it's been a real pleasure to be able to share with you my knowledge of the Mandelbulb 3D environment, because you can do some amazing stuff with this software. It's got its caveats, it's got its idiosyncrasies. It crashes from time to time, but there's ways of being able to handle that. So I still think it's a great software, and it really produces some really nice imagery or animations, depending upon what you're attempting to do. It's like anything else. I mean, it takes knowledge, takes some experience, talking with others, trying it, making mistakes, reversing. But the whole idea is that you're able to be an artist in kind of the art of using math to produce what are referred to as Mandelbulb fractals. And obviously Mandelbulb is it's a different term that describes a three-dimensional fractal. A Mandelbrot would be along the lines of the standard classical Mandelbrot type of fractal. There's other types of fractals too, and I've experimented with a few different types, but we could spend another 80 sessions just talking about fractal technology, fractal math, and certainly there's a number of fractal generators or fractal software applications that are out on the market. Some are old and classic. I'm not really too aware of anything that's more recent. I truly am not aware of a fractal generator, a software that is put out by a large corporate entity. The market just simply isn't there for large corporations to get involved with this particular very narrow niche market. However, I'm not complaining, because the tools are there to create fractal art. And if it's something you want to do, the tools are there. They may not always be perfectly polished. They may not always be efficient and rapid and using the latest rendering methodology. But the tools are there, and you can do some remarkable stuff with them. Now, speaking of remarkable stuff, where we left off in the last session, session 80, we were talking about the various properties that we can use to optimize our rendering. We want to minimize the oversampling or overstepping. We want the best possible detail in our image, and we want all of that with a compromise on rendering. And I had talked about that if we're going for a still, we want really good detail in our Mandelbulb object or our scene with minimum detail, and I'm going to have to say minimum oversampling. You don't want a whole lot of white dots in your scene. All right, and you don't really care about the rendering so much. You're only going to render it once, maybe twice, to tweak it out. But animation, it's a little bit different story. Your goal is to get good quality, minimum oversampling, white dots, with the most efficient rendering you can get, because you're going to render many of these things. Now, let's talk about animation. I don't know how many sessions we're going to go on the topic of animations, but I don't really care. I want to be able to cover this in the detail that will get you get you to a point where you can create these animations efficiently with minimum redo, with minimum false starts, and certainly with maximum results. Now, that last phrase there that I said encapsulates a number of different approaches, techniques, tips, things that I've learned over time. And I want to share that with you in the upcoming sessions as we talk about animation. Now, the first thing we got to do is we got to clean up our environment here. All right, so let's, we don't need this snipping tool anymore. We don't need to save it. And I will save this as a backup. And I'm going to call this, I want to call this 80. All right, 80. At the end of session 80 is what I called it. All right. Now that particular image, if you recall, we were going for the best DE, which is 1.6, and with the best ray step multiplier, which we found is 0.5. Everything else is pretty much defaulted. All right. So and what I had done is I had rendered this at 3840. Now, as I've described before, I don't render the Mandelbulb scenes at 3840 4K. I render them at 1920. All right, with the aspect ratio of 16 to 9. Okay, all right. So that is the scene that I want to work with, 1920. And I'm going to bump this down so that we can see the whole thing in our screen. Okay, good enough. Well, I'm about to, let's pull this out a little bit here. Get rid of that bottom scroll bar. Okay, we are ready for keyframing. Well, maybe not really. We're going to start the keyframing, and then we're going to spend some time and I'll show you around the animation maker window. But let's get a couple keyframes to work with first. All right, so in order to keyframe, I need my navigation window. I don't need the lighting panel, and I don't need the formulas panel, not for keyframing. All right, let's just kind of tweak that a little bit. All right, let's come over here to my OBS, and I'm going to turn on my Stream Deck so that you can see it. Obviously, keyframing hasn't got a lot to do with navigation. All right. So, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to fire up the animation window, and I think I could probably put it right there. It's probably a good place for it, huh? Okay. So I have my three windows, my main window, my navigator, and they call this the animation maker. I got my three windows to work with. Now, let's just make a couple keyframes here to get some material into the animation window, and then we'll turn our attention and we'll talk about that window. Let's make our first keyframe. With your animation position, just the way you want it, and I forgot to pull the parameters over, my apologies. Let's start right there for purposes of our animation. In order to get a keyframe up into the animation maker window, we got two choices. I can either punch this button right here, Anna key for, all right, or I could press the F key, F as in Frank, unless I have turned the F key off. It's defaulted to enabled. So I can press the F key, or I can press the animation button. Now you'll notice up here that I have a keyframe now. All right. Now I'm going to make a second keyframe, and then we're going to end this session. And then when we come back, we'll talk about the keyframes. I'm going to make a second keyframe right there, but I'm going to animate. I'm going to move through the scene. I'm going to keep it nice and simple. I'm going to use my Stream Deck here, and I'm going to just simply move forward. There we go. I'm going to add that keyframe. Now I have 2 keyframes in my scene. All right, and we're going to break here and come back, and we'll talk about these keyframes, and then we'll move into talking about this animation maker window. All right, so I'll see you in the next session.